When I was released from federal prison, I had the opportunity to speak at the FBI Academy in Quantico, Virginia. And before I spoke, the FBI agent who invited me to speak, Paul Bertrand, he was the agent that arrested me. And prior to my speaking, he said to the cadets or agents, had I spoken honestly when they interviewed me, my outcome would have been different. Further, when I was done with my presentation, he called me aside and said, "You didn't take kickbacks." I said, "I know I didn't. Yet my plea agreement with the United States government states that I took kickbacks. The problem as a defendant was I was unable to articulate what I did, what I learned, and why I will never do it again, along with all of the conduct in my case." The reason I'm filming this story, why I went to federal prison, lessons learned, and I continue to do it, is because I'm always refining my story. And I want you, if you're a defendant who's made bad decisions, you don't agree with your plea agreement, you're not working well with your lawyer, you don't fully understand how you became entrenched in this system, I need you to own your story, to work on it daily. In this thumbnail, I put up a work in progress. I was a naive fool before I went to prison who thought I had arrived, though I learned in federal prison we are all works in progress. I wish before I went to prison I owned my story. My outcome would have been different. I need you to own your story. And perhaps in the 20 or 30 minutes that I'll share my story, it will force or compel you to work harder, to do better. When I came home from prison, I began speaking, cold calling professors, asking if they would give me their classroom to speak. And I had to do better. And I wanted to share my story. So I put up a photo of my dad Cody in this thumbnail because I used to practice my presentations to Cody, and he would sit there attentively and never move, whether it was good or bad. Cody was sitting there like a statue listening to me speak. So while I lost Cody a few years ago, I will never forget rescuing him when I came home from prison, and I will never forget him sitting there patiently hours on end while I would practice my lecture. And here I am. Thank you again for joining our community. And if you find value, please like and subscribe. We're so grateful to have you here as I transition into why I went to federal prison, or as my judge would like to say, the cost of silence. When I graduated USC, I wanted to become a stockbroker. I was studying psychology at USC. My parents went through a very difficult divorce in 1993. There were the Riding King riots, the recession, and after 23 years of marriage, my parents divorced. And through the divorce, we went to a counselor who really helped our family. So when I went to college, I said, I want to be a psychiatrist and help people. My sophomore year, I was introduced to the brokerage business. I had a cousin who worked at Goldman Sachs. And I'll tell you, when I went to Goldman Sachs at 5 a.m. my sophomore summer at USC, I said, I ain't going to be a psychiatrist no more. I want to become a stockbroker. It was intoxicating to hear 30, 40, $50 million bond and stock orders. It was exciting. And when I heard those orders, I felt like I was playing baseball again in front of 10 or 15,000 people. So I knew I wanted to transition into the brokerage industry. My cousin at Goldman Sachs encouraged me when I graduated USC to get an MBA, but I wanted to be a salesman. I felt I put in my time. I had student loans. I felt that it was time to work and begin to get paid. Before I graduated, I was a cold calling stockbroker as well at Prudential while I was doing work at Goldman Sachs. And I had no problem with rejection. Baseball conditioned me for rejection. The cliche holds in baseball: if you get a hit 3 out of every 10 times, you'll be a Hall of Famer. So failing and rejection were of no concern to me. I wanted to excel. So I cold called all summer, to the detriment of my baseball career at USC, which I knew was ending anyway. When I graduated USC, I had accepted a position in Orange County to work at Merrill Lynch. And like many of you endure, long days, in at 5 o'clock in the morning, out at 10. Now, a problem I had early in my career was not feeling as if I had any allowance for any balance. I thought it had to be a singular focus to advance my career, get my license, and excel. So while I graduated USC as a student athlete, within a year of graduating college, I put on 40 pounds. I wasn't exercising. I was neglecting relationships. So my values began to go astray pretty quickly after graduating USC. And I would argue I began to admire men who made the most money, who had the biggest office, the nicest Rolex, and perhaps I didn't pay attention to how they obtained it or other values in their life. Are they on their fourth marriage? Are they having 3 or 4 drinks before they pull into the driveway to see their family? What type of husband and father were they? I didn't consider that at 21 or 22 out of USC. It was, they're succeeding, they're making money, I want to be like them. I left Merrill Lynch after 2 years or so in a dispute over commissions. And some, they wanted the junior broker, me, to merge their book of business with a senior broker. And I had seen so many junior brokers flunk out of the business because once the junior broker merged with the senior broker would just put all of the work on the junior guy. And I'm like, I don't want to sit around all day managing the senior broker's book of business. I don't want to do that. I don't want to get a smaller piece of the pie. A lot of junior brokers merge their book of business with the senior broker because they feel like it's going to lead to eternal life in the business. They'll never be able to not succeed because they were the senior broker. Yet the truth is, these young guys work all day managing the book of business. They're not hustling to bring in business, and they all flunk out of the business, not because they're fired. They're just not making enough money to sustain themselves. And I came to loathe some of these senior brokers who I felt leveraged off of the hard work of young brokers. So when I didn't merge my book of business with a senior partner, they gave me an ultimatum. When faced with an ultimatum at times, I will make a choice when feel pressure that might not even be in my best interest. It might have been in my best interest to stay at Merrill Lynch, but I said no. And I went to a small firm called Crow Wheaton. Now, when I was at Crow Wheaton, I wanted to finally ask my friends with whom I played baseball at USC for their money. Many of them said, dude, you're young, you're just out of the broker, you're just in the brokerage business. Like, I know you from USC, but my agent is referring me to this guy. I began to reach out to agents. The agents would then say, we know you, you're young, we'll give you a chance, but we've never heard of Crow Wheaton. And having very little loyalty to these brokerage firms I was working for, I jumped ship again and I joined a partnership at Bear Stearns when I was 26 years old. My partnership agreement stated that I would get 25% of the commission. My senior partner, Kenny, would get 75%. In other words, if you called in to do a trade and it was $1,000 commission, Kenny would get 75%, I would get 25%. And those numbers were fair when we merged our book of business. He had about $100 million more in assets than me. After all, he'd been in the business about 6 or 7 years longer. I had 40 million, together 140. It was a pretty impactful partnership as we were going to go after professional athletes, of which he already had many: Mike Piazza, Trevor Hoffman, and many other successful baseball players. It was a good marriage initially. About 6 or 7 months into our partnership, I had my first real breakdown, my first time I crossed the line and made decisions that were fundamentally different than the person that my parents and coaches had raised me to be. I was in a dispute with my senior partner over commissions. I had brought in an account that was doing $100,000 a month in production. I did what any of you should do, which is, if you feel you're worthy of a raise, you ask for a raise, not because you need more money or you want more money. It's because you've earned it. I thought I had earned a raise, and I put the numbers in front of my senior partner. This is how much I brought in. This is how much I make. I think I've earned more. And he essentially said, you're here because of me, and you wouldn't have closed that account without me. Get out of my office. You're not getting a raise. And in a way, I harken back to those brokers I saw earlier in my career at Merrill Lynch, who I felt leveraged off the minds and hard work of the junior brokers. I grew to loathe and despise him because he didn't appreciate me and say thank you. A lot of times people presume you want just to raise. Money's great. You know, it also goes a long way. Thank you. I appreciate you. You are contributing to the growth of our company. I never got that. So when I didn't get the raise, despite my production, I took matters into my own hands and I began to take commissions that I hadn't earned, in total violation of our partnership. I share this with you because very few people wake up and say, yes, today's the day. I'm going to, this is the moment, actually. Hold on. This is the moment, 12:08. That I'm going to flush my life down the toilet, come in a white-collar crime, create victims, embarrass my family. It is indeed a cliched slippery slope, and bad decisions tend to start weeks, months, and years earlier. And my bad decision started when I took commissions from my senior partner under the idea that I had been wrong, under the idea that he's actually stealing from me, and I had no other option. Well, after I stole commissions from my partner that I had not earned, I began to go in what I would call a freak-out mode. I feared that I was going to get caught. So every time the phone rang, I'm like, oh my goodness, it's my partner. It's my compliance manager. They have found out. So in so doing, I'm beginning to neglect clients because I fear my partner's going to find out that I took commissions. It consumed me 24 hours a day. After about a year of not getting caught, of my partner never finding out, he came to me one day and said, we have an offer to go to UBS, a competing brokerage firm in Century City, right across the street from their Stearns office. And he said, why don't we go there? They're going to give us $1 million. I didn't even care about the money. I was just happy that I could start anew from Bear Stearns without anyone having found out that I stole commissions from my partner. I was like, I'm in, let's take the deal. It's great. And just like that, on the 16th of June, 2001, my partner Kenny and I went to UBS from Bear Stearns. Now, when we went there, we had more than $140 million under management, or that's what I should say UBS expected us to bring over. You get a bonus of $1 million in the brokerage industry, or any bonus, based on what's called your trailing 12-month commissions. And based on our trailing 12-month commissions and our assets under management, they were going to give us a bonus of more than $1 million. But something terrible happened after about 6 months into our tenure at UBS. Only about half of the money that we said we had came over, and UBS management was beginning to get upset. For example, they would call us into their office and say, well, wait a second, Paperny, I don't understand this. We gave you a bonus based on 140 or so million dollars in assets, but you're 6 months in, you only have $70 million and your production is down. Did you lie to us? Where's the money, man? And during the 6-month window, I'm beginning to see brokers getting let go, ostensibly for ethical violations. But the truth is they weren't producing. And when you don't produce in the brokerage industry, you go bye-bye. And then they come and they get the bonus back. But so many dudes like me invested or spent it. In my case, I invested in real estate, which was illiquid. So I grew concerned that I was already on my 4th brokerage firm. I grew concerned they were going to find a way to let me go because I wasn't producing. And then it hit me why I was struggling to bring clients over. Well, I was obsessing about getting caught and stealing commissions from my partner. I'd begun to neglect clients. So when I left Bear Stearns and went to UBS and I called clients and asked them to come with me, many did not because they had felt forgotten about. They said, you didn't return our call. You are enamored with the athletes that you bring in, the private jets that you fly on, all of the spring training or baseball games that you attend. We feel forgotten. And that's why I will tell you, it is not illegal perhaps to treat clients differently, though if you were out for your own self-interest, it might be unethical, maybe not dishonest, but if you're out for your own self-interest, which we all are, consider that. Consider that as you're growing and taking on new clients and asking yourself at all times, are you following through on the commitments that you made? We did not, which is why only half of our clients came with us. And then we grew concerned we were going to get fired. And then things changed the 16th of June, 2002, when a gentleman named Keith, someone with whom I had worked earlier in my career, called to ask if he could bring his $6 million over to UBS. He had a very small hedge fund. And while $6 million in the hedge fund world isn't a lot of money, we knew it was an aggressive options trading hedge fund, which could produce as much as $100,000 a month. And while UBS wanted assets, you know what they wanted? They wanted the commission. So I went to Keith's office. I got the paperwork signed, transferred over the $6 million. And guess what? That first month, $100,000 in production. The next month, $100,000 in production. We're beginning to move up the board. Management is happy. Of course, we're beginning to make more money. The consequence, if there is one, of getting such a significant loan, you pay the taxes on the loan over 6 years. So I was in a position where I had to make $12,000 a month before I saw 1 penny in my paycheck. Don't feel sorry for me. I took the money, but I'm simply conveying to you some of the pressures I felt in receiving this bonus, knowing that I had to net 12 grand before I saw a paycheck of 1 penny. This new client helped us, 100,000 a month the first many months. But after 6 months, something tragic happened. The 6 million he brought in, he lost. Then he raised another $6 million. And guess what? He lost all of that too. And during this period of raising and losing money, he was paying us $100,000 a month in production. Of course, the rationalization is we sit in our nice corner office in Century City follows. We're not managing the money. He is. We don't know any of his clients. They're his clients, not ours. They don't open up accounts with us. They give him the money. His account is with us. All of the trades are unsolicited. They're complex, but they've hired him as the money manager. We simply execute the trades. These were the rationalizations we told ourselves to make us feel better as we sat silent, knowing that, of course, he's lying to people to raise money. Imagine that sales pitch. Keith, my client, the hedge fund manager, comes into your home. I don't know you. We're live here on YouTube, and pretend it goes something like this. Hi, Jimmy. I'm Keith. Nice to know you. Jimmy, my hedge fund happens to be down 100% this year. In fact, every dollar I've raised, I've lost, but things are going to turn. How do you feel, Jimmy? Would you like to give me $1 million? You know what you would do? You'd call security. You'd say, get out of our house, because no rational investor or normal investor would give someone the money if they knew all of it was going to go in the toilet. So we knew that he was lying to people in order to raise money, yet we kept our mouths shut, ran it by compliance, and expressed to them there are heavy losses here. And UBS, compliance, my partner and me, we began to scheme to ensure the commissions continued, but we protected ourselves from any fallout. And during this first year, I did not meet or speak with any of his investors. We continued to execute the trades, but we knew he was lying to people to raise money, and we chose to stay silent. Now, when you work with someone who's dishonest, as Keith was and I was, and when Keith is producing that amount of commissions, let me tell you what's going to happen in time. They're going to want help. Okay. When you're not going to do $100,000 a month in commissions, and if you're dishonest, and eventually not ask for help. And I was all too willing to give it, when after about a year or so of turning the other way and keeping my mouth shut, I engaged in real deceit with my mouth for the first time, which is why I don't want to misrepresent the title of this video. My judge would argue I stayed silent. I did for too long, but I also did things that were worse, including when a client of Keith's called me to say, hey, I'm thinking of giving $1 million to Keith, this hedge fund manager. What do you think? And I would try to have my cake and eat it too. I would say something where I would hope it wouldn't get me into trouble, but also knowing that I was kind of taking care of Keith, our client who's paying us so much money. The conversation would go something like this. Keith is the money manager, not me. You hired him, not us. I cannot vouch for the performance of the hedge fund, though I can tell you Keith is a valued client of our firm. By giving them the warm and fuzzy, simply stating that Keith was a client of ours, even though I said we don't manage the money, it compelled people to feel comfortable with Keith. And what the government would later allege, we gave credence or credibility to Keith that he had not earned. I would take these phone calls. I would give that same statement. It helped Keith raise money, which of course led to more commissions. But I will be very clear that I knew when people were investing with him that it was very likely they were going to lose money. And I simply rationalized, I don't manage the money he does. It's part of the reason I went to prison, and rightly so. After about a year or so of taking some of these phone calls, we began to see real evidence that Keith was in trouble and lying to people, which enables me to transition to a screen share. Now, I understand you're not going to be able to see this the way this is set up. I did it as best I could, but I'll give you an idea of some of the deceit we saw and more evidence of how our team turned the other way. In October 2004, my client Keith issued this press release all over the world. And this press release says Keith Gillibert to speak at prestigious London Investment Management Conference. And at the end of this release, I've read it enough to know, it says that Keith's hedge fund operates a guaranteed return fund, essentially saying you cannot lose money. And over the last 7.5 years, this hedge fund has averaged over 27% return net of fees. When this press release came in from my client's assistant, my senior business partner and I looked at each other and we read it. And we didn't really know what to do at first. We didn't say anything to each other, but we knew that it was wrong. We knew that it was a lie because we knew that every dollar he raised, he lost. He had never had a positive quarter, yet we just read this release. So I did what I hope none of you will ever do in the face of indisputable evidence of a crime, of fraud, of deceit. I hope you are better than me and you follow the values your parents raised you to follow. I know my parents raised me to do the right thing, and I had ruthless coaches that held me accountable. Coaches that are so ruthless. If YouTube existed when I was growing up, they would all be put out of business based on what they say and did. Frequently, I would leave a practice crying, but they made me better. I knew that it was wrong to do the wrong thing, which is exactly what I did. I deleted this press release. I acted as if I never saw it, and sure, they could prove that it came into my email system, but how could you prove that I read it? Just like that, business as usual. Around this time, we're all freaked out, of course, that when my client eventually blows up, that we're going to get sued. They're not going to sue him. He doesn't have any damn money. They're going to sue the bank. So I took the lead in creating steps to protect the company from any fallout. So I went to compliance and said, I'd like to create a document, a disclosure document that says if anyone chooses to invest with our client, Keith, the hedge fund manager, sign this document stating that UBS, Kenny, Justin, no one at UBS solicited, endorsed, or recommended this investment. Think about that for a moment. Indemnification agreements in business are great. They're used every single day. But what Paul Bertrand from the FBI and the Department of Justice would later tell me, indemnification agreements are fine. It was your reasoning behind the letter. It was criminal. So while I thought this letter protected me, it was a big part of my downfall. I created it hoping to protect myself, knowing that an investor would sign this agreement stating UBS is not responsible if you invest. Keith manages the money. If you lose money, don't sue us. We created this letter knowing our client lost every damn penny. And UBS, along with, they vetted it. They applauded me for my ingenuity in keeping the account alive while the gravy train of commissions can continue. So with this disclosure document from my branch manager's office, we called Keith and said, anytime you send us money to your hedge fund, make sure that your client signs this paperwork stating that UBS does not solicit, endorse, or recommend this investment. You know what Keith said? Of course. And because we knew he was dishonest and a thief, that he would just buried into the paperwork and his people would sign it because they trusted him. But we told ourselves, we ain't there. We don't see, we don't hear nothing. So now we got scheming with UBS. I read a press release, and then one more example of turning it the other way and keeping my dumb mouth shut. Fall of 2004, Keith is struggling to raise money, and he puts a call out to small-time money managers that he will give them 5% of their book of business, along with a percentage of the management fee moving forward. He finds someone named John who has a $5 million book of business, and John agrees to sell his book to Keith for 250 grand, 5% of $5 million, plus John will get a continuing management fee. And we knew Keith had misrepresented the numbers to John, or else John would never have sold his small book of business. Keith asked us to attend a meeting. I said no. He pushed. He said, I'll kind of take the account away. I'm sure there's a lot of brokers in Century City that would love a guy doing $100,000 a month in commissions. He was correct. So Kenny and I agreed to attend the meeting. And a few minutes into this meeting with Kenny, my partner, Keith, my client, the hedge fund manager, John, who's thinking of selling his book of business to Keith, and me, we start engaging and chatting over sushi in Century City. Then my senior partner, Kenny, says to John, so why are you thinking of you selling your book of business to Keith? The worst question in the world. And John, the hedge fund manager, said, well, I've seen rate of return. I've seen the performance on the hedge fund. Performance sells itself, it would later state in my plea agreement. Hearing that, I did what I think some people on YouTube encourage me to do, sometimes encourage me to do. I shut up. I stopped talking. I said nothing. I got kind of uncomfortable, like, this guy, this is not great. It's different when you don't see an investor. It's a little more different when you speak to an investor, but when you see someone's face and they believe something and you think by keeping your damn mouth shut, it's going to protect you from fallout and drama and total violation of everything I was raised to know, by turning the other way, thinking if I don't say anything, I'm protected, and letting him give money that he eventually lost. This is why when some people leave comments like, I cannot believe you work with certain people. We like you, Justin. We believe you. We love what you've been through and how you've overcome it. But how do you work with certain people? I'm no different. Indeed, what I did is worse than the lion's share of people who trust us. You just don't see it because you see Justin of 20, 21, 22, and 23, and not the stupid effing criminal I was in 2004 and 2005. And you see me differently, which is what I hope every defendant gets to, where people see them differently, not for their bad decisions, but who they're striving to become. But I am no worse than the people who leave horrific messages here on YouTube and TikTok. We like you, but how can you work with this criminal? I was one. My partner and I go back up to this office and we realize we're in a whole lot of trouble, but we convince ourselves we're in okay shape because we have this disclosure document signed that, of course, John signed before he sold his $5 million book of business to Keith. But with white collar crime, it all comes crashing down. I assure you of that. And it came crashing down for me the 15th of December, 2004, when my branch manager called me into his office. I was on a lunch date at the time at Houston's in Century City, which is now out of business. And my branch manager called and said, get back to my effing office in 10 minutes. I said, I'm busy. He said, get back here in 10 effing minutes. I said, I can't. He said, get your effing ass back to the office. I lied to this nice woman that I was on a lunch date with, and I walked through the Century City Mall to my office in Century City, and I knew that my life had changed forever. I knew. I heard the tone. I knew I was about to pay the price for working with this hedge fund client. I knew I was about to pay the price for keeping my mouth shut. I knew I was about to pay the price for scheming with my colleagues. Now, when you're raised in the hills of Encino with privilege, you don't think like prison bad. Okay. I knew Michael Milken. We grew up with his family. I played baseball with his nephew in Encino. Like, I knew Michael Milken, the junk bond king who went to Lompoc for a little while for his $500 million scheme. I knew it could be bad, just not prison bad. I'm like, yeah, I lose my job and I'm young. I have resources. I'll go sell real estate with my friend Sam Pompeo, which is what I did for 3 years before I went to prison. I walk in and my branch manager says, sign your name for me 8 times. I said, okay, and I do. There's my signature, later given to me by the FBI. Thank you. And then I look at my signature and my branch manager looks to confirm that the signature on this document is not my own. And he asked me to read this document, which I did. And it says, Mr. Gilbert, that was my client, Keith Gilbert. The above referenced accounts are managed by Capital Management Group with UBS Financial Services as the custodian. In the unlikely event that CMG ceases to exist or can no longer perform its duty as a portfolio manager to its clients, all assets are guaranteed and insured for their full market value by UBS Financial Services. He signed my name. So I later learned when Keith would come into my office, listen to me lament about my senior partner who didn't appreciate me, on the way out, he would steal letterhead and he would take this letterhead and send it to his clients to give them the warm and fuzzy if they were concerned about their investment, which is why that day an investor in his hedge fund sent a fax to my branch manager with a cover letter that said, is this true? Is it true if this hedge fund goes out of business, you're going to insure and guarantee my assets? That's when it blew up the 15th of December, 2004. Now, like so many people who traverse this system, I chose to go into stupid, double down stupidity mode. So when I was like 28 years old. I'd never really been in trouble before. I convinced myself that UBS was part of this scheme because they encouraged it. We created this disclosure document. I was probably more culpable because I had a relationship with Keith and I executed the trade more on a day-to-day basis. But all of us were involved. We were at these meetings and we schemed together. So I was naive enough to think that we would all kind of look out for one another and protect each other. But of course, as we know, everyone goes into protection mode. And on the 15th of December, 2004, when my branch manager asked me to read this letter, he then said, "We don't want you to come in for a while. Let us resolve and figure this out." So I'm like, well, what do I do? He said, "Just get out, go home, and we'll call you." And then he did call me the 11th of January, 2004 to 2005 to ask me to come back in. I thought I would get my desk back. And he told me UBS is firing me for inconsistent answers I gave when they interrogated me over this hedge fund. I said, wait a second. You're not firing me for working with this hedge fund manager and all of us turning the other way for money, of which are significant while he knew he was losing money, but rather you're firing me for inconsistent answers you claim I gave." They said, "That's right." I looked down my office, two huge dudes are standing outside, taking my USC photo off the wall, taking the photos from the golf outings I had played with clients. They box it all up. Everyone is outside of their office looking at me make the walk. They escort me down to my car. I'm fired. I drive off. I'm thinking, it's all good, man. I'm young. I got some money. I'll start over. I can spin this. It's okay. But that's when the line began, because my senior partner then called and said, "Hey, look, you have a lot of clients with whom you manage and maintain. I don't want them to leave. I want you to get on the phone with them, tell them that you've resigned to go invest in real estate and do other projects. Make sure they stayed with me." And that's where my line began. As soon as I was fired, rather than telling the truth and owning and acknowledge it, I began to lie to people who had trusted me. Also, they could stay at UBS with my partner under the idea that someday he may compensate me if those clients stayed with him, doubling down on bad decisions. Over the next 3 months, very little happened, actually, other than apparently the Department of Justice and Securities and Exchange Commission beginning an investigation that UBS was all too happy to give them information on and paint me out as a rogue employee. I didn't yet lawyer up. I lawyered with a civil lawyer because some lawsuits began to come in from disgruntled investors of my client's hedge fund, which makes a lot of sense. But I never thought criminal until the 20th of April, 2005, when the FBI showed up at my front door. So they walk around like, where I live. They got the navy blue jacket on, the FBI letters, the FBI hat. They walk in. My little dog is like freaking out. And they wheel in these boxes. And guess what's inside of the boxes? They're all my emails. Okay? So every email I'd ever sent to Bear Stearns and UBS are beautifully collated, highlighted, the tabs, everything I'd ever said stuck together. And I know they do this because when I spoke at the FBI Academy, I saw and know where young agents sit all day in a room reading our text messages and emails and piecing them together to tie together conspiracies. So the FBI walks in, dog's freaking out. I'm nervous. I'm scared. I say, I should get a lawyer. They say, good idea. And a month later, I sit for an interview with the FBI. Of course, I retain a lawyer. Like so many defendants, I lie to my lawyer. I spin. I feign ignorance. I blame other people. Certainly wasn't my fault. I was a USC athlete. It ain't me, man. Never gave my lawyer a chance to properly defend me. Frankly, he didn't invest the time to try to understand what I did as a former U.S. attorney. I think he just presumed that I was guilty. He easily defaulted to the government's version of events. David Willingham was the U.S. attorney, now a defense attorney in Los Angeles, who's a friend with whom I work. But I don't feel like my lawyer ever believed me, but I didn't help him because I didn't really give him anything to work with. When we sit down for an interview with the FBI, and Paul and I always joke about this, we laugh. I always say the FBI is great, except when they're arresting or indicting you. We sit for the interview, and Paul Bertrand says to me, "Justin, have you ever seen a press release that talks about a 27% rate of return on your hedge fund?" And I'm like, what are we talking about? I wasn't ready for this. You're coming right out of the gates with like this question, like, where am I from? What do I do? They don't care. They don't care where I'm from, where I went to school, Tolly and Bernie, my brother. They don't care. No, all they care about is the victims. Defendants make it about themselves, how our own life is imploding. They no care. They care about the victims, people that were hurt, and they are obsessed with your post-defense conduct. In other words, what you do after you've gotten into trouble. I was in the post-defense conduct stage the day I got fired, January 11, 2005, yet I chose to go down the making decisions that I thought would help me. The irony is they end up making matters measurably worse. So there's no small talk, right? Justin, do you recall a press release talking about a 27% return? I said, no, I don't. My lawyer gave me a look like, you can say I don't recall. No, I don't remember it. Now, I know the email came in, but how could they prove I read it? Are they read my mind now? Is this what the people do at the FBI? So I'm like, I don't remember. Like, Justin, he's like this. Just to confirm, do you recall an email talking about 27% return. I said, I'm no, this is what I'm thinking to myself at the time. How many times I got to tell these people from the FBI, I don't remember no damn press release. No, I do not. And then he went like this. Then he reached over. And when he reached over, let me tell you what came to my mind. Game over. Okay. Am I so foolish and dumb and naive that I don't know they have every damn email I've ever sent that I was in business, and Bear Stearns and UBS were all too happy to turn it over? 1 second, he pulls out the email and he said, Justin, I'd like you to read this. I said, what am I reading, man? Like, I don't understand. Would you read this email for me, please? Sure, I'd be happy to. And here it is. There's an email I sent to my client, apparently, November 2nd, 2004. He had said to me, I've never lied to you. And my response was, is that the pot calling the kettle black? I enjoyed your press release talking about the guaranteed return fund and 27% a year. And then I stopped reading. And Paul said, would you read that again? And I'm thinking, I just read it. I got to read it again. I would like you to read it again, please, because you've said you don't remember it, but I have this document talking about a 27% return fund that you acknowledge, but you just told us you didn't read it. So to be clear that we're on the same page, Mr. Paperny, it's Paperny. Would you please read it again? I'd be happy to. This is awesome. I'm going down. Why didn't my lawyer prepare me for this meeting? This is his fault. It's just easier to blame other people. It feels good in the moment. Read it again. Is that the pot calling the kettle black? I enjoyed your press release talking about the guaranteed return fund. Then Paul said, do you remember a press release? And I said, well, I might recall a press release. Arrogance, stupidity. I might have remember a press release. My lawyer abruptly ends the meeting. We walk outside and I'm like, did it go good? It's like, Justin, you just obstructed a federal investigation. That's bad. You're in a lot of trouble. I think you're going to prison. I'm like, but I wasn't under oath. No, but that's obstruction. You just lied to the FBI. You're in a lot of trouble. And then guess what? Nothing happened for a year. I thought I had gotten away with it. I'm like, I remember thinking to myself after like 3, 4, 5 months after the feds left, I'm like, this is incredible. Like, I got away with taking commissions from my senior partner. I lied to the feds and facilitated, I turned the other way for money. Like, and it's good. Like, I am the chosen one. Like, I'll never do anything wrong again. I promise I'm clear and good. I used to tell myself that before I go to bed. 5 months became 6 months, became 7 months, became 10 months, became 11 months. And by that time, I've gotten a real estate license. I have learned from so many of the mistakes I made. I'm crushing it selling real estate. Though back then, to make money in real estate, all you really needed was a pulse. And then the 28th of April, 2006, 1 year to the day, 1 year to the day after the Fed show up in my home, I'm laughing, but I should be crying. April 28th, 2006, 1 year to the day after the Fed show up, I read this press release. I shouldn't say I read, my mom read. It's easy to joke 15 years later, but the actions and my consequences were devastating to victims I helped create. And even though all of them have been paid back by both me and UBS, doesn't replace the pain and hardship and the loss of humanity they went through because of people like me. The 20th of April, 2006, I read this press release. Hedge fund manager agreed to plead guilty to conspiracy charges and security fraud case. And at the end of this release that my mom had sent me, it says, Gilbert also admitted that he conspired with an account manager at a major brokerage firm to mislead investors with regard to the performance, the risk, and oversight of CMB by the management firm. So I call my lawyer, am I the unindicted, unnamed co-conspirator? He said, of course you are. And I also just spoke with David Willingham. They want 60 months in federal prison. And I said, what do you mean 60 months? They all acknowledge that I'm like much less culpable. Why would I get 60 months? What's he going to get, 15 years? And my lawyer then said to me, Justin, you don't understand. Well, you've been selling real estate for the last year and showing property to the Kardashians and other celebrities you think are impressive out in Calabasas. Your co-defendant, Keith, has been cooperating with the feds. When he called you, he was wearing a wire and listening. So that he's on the right side of the law. And even though he was more culpable, you're looking at 5 years in federal prison and he's looking at 18 months. And at the time, I began to learn about the twisted, warped nature of the criminal justice system. Namely, they don't necessarily care who's more culpable or who is swept in. They like people that accept responsibility. And while some people in this space call it snitches and tattletaling, the government says it's part of the process of accepting responsibility. And I give him credit for seizing that opportunity to cooperate, because he was married with 4 young children, and he knew this was his one-way ticket to get a shorter federal prison sentence. It wasn't his fault. It was my fault for not understanding what a government investigation means, how to prepare, to own my story, to how to work well with a lawyer. Instead, I lie to the feds, and I think because a year has gone by that I am in the clear, all the while my co-defendant is cooperating. My lawyer then says to me, "What would you like to do?" I'm like, "What do you mean, what would I like to do?" He's like, "Well, you can go to trial, give me $1 million, or you can plead guilty to 1 count of conspiracy to get 60 months, a cap of 60 months, which is what I think you will get." I'm like, what is 60 months in prison for what? What does that even mean? He's like, "For a kid that went to USC and has had a lot of success, you don't quite get it." I'm like, "No, I do not get it, my man. I've been selling real estate for a year. I have a license. I'm freaking crushing it. My clients love me. I moved on from UBS. That was a whole lifetime ago. I'm good. I don't want to deal with this. Like, can I write a check? Can this become civil? Figure it out." He's like, "No, it doesn't work that way. People are hurt because of you. You think turning the other way for money protects you from the fallout. It does not. You're culpable. You're the enabler. This happened in part because of you. They want you to go to prison. You are going to prison. The question is, for how long?" So I did what so many people do. I faked it. Said, "I'm sorry, I'll never do it again. I accept responsibility." And I put up a lot of boilerplate, cliched nonsense about accepting responsibility. "I'll never do it again. I'm sorry. Take mercy on me." Asked people to write character reference letters. And they did some volunteer work only because I thought it would help me get a shorter federal prison sentence. And it did. Scratched a check under the guise that I wanted to give it to victims to repay. But the truth was I only scratched a check because I hoped that it would help keep me out of prison. And it did. Kind of regret that in retrospect. I filmed that video separately. And on the 25th of April, 2008, I surrendered to prison, not before getting sentenced 2 months earlier. And at my sentencing hearing, my lawyer asked the U.S. attorney, as I know many of you do, "Hey, let's not issue any press releases around Justin's guilty plea or his conviction, if that's possible." And they're like, "What do you mean?" They're like, "No, he's selling real estate right now. He's making money to pay back restitution, and it would hurt his real estate career, even though he's disclosed it to all of his clients that he's pled guilty to a crime. It wouldn't be great for the brand if you issue these press releases." Of course, the DOJ says, "Of course we're going to issue a press release. It's deterrence. But of course, as a defendant, you need to put yourself in the shoes of the stakeholders. They want convictions. They want to look it on television. They want to run for office someday. The prosecutor wants to become a defense attorney. It's in their interest to show the community how they're putting criminals like me in prison. And they do this by creating our brand online." So of course, they issue the press release that states that I pled guilty, and there was another one when I was sentenced, and myriad by the Securities and Exchange Commission. And at my sentencing hearing, as I wrap up this live video, I told the judge that I was sorry, and I was not. I was angry that I was caught, and I said whatever I had to do to get a shorter federal prison sentence. And when I began to speak, Judge Wilson heard me, and he said, "You know, I am tired of salesmen turning the other way for money. Most don't get caught. You did. You knew that it was wrong. I'm going to make an example out of you and send you to federal prison for 18 months. I'm glad that he did, because I was wrong. You can question corrections in this country, how long people should go to prison, but there should be significant consequences for my actions." And Judge Wilson hit me with them that day. And when I surrendered to federal prison on 28th of April 2008, feeling as a fraud and a failure, a liar and charlatan, so much damage behind me despite all of the opportunities that I'd squandered and wasted, I began the reflection period, the introspection period with Michael, and trying to understand the motivations behind my choices. How did I end up here? And I think in retrospect, at 27 or 28, I just got lazy, and I found a golden ticket, or Willy Wonka ticket, with one client that could provide the income I had grown accustomed to. And I didn't want to do the work anymore to have that income be spread amongst hundreds and hundreds of clients honorably. I had gotten lazy, and I had become reliant on one client to continue to provide the lifestyle I'd become accustomed to for many, many years. That's the reality. And now that I'm on the other side, as I wrap up this video, there's a few takeaways. One, you may all be perfect. You may not need to make any changes. Indeed, I've learned the wrong way by insinuating that people need to make changes. I'm not saying you need to, but if you do, be better than me. Don't wait till you're going through a divorce or health issues, if you're out of shape, or mental health issues that you don't treat, or don't work to become ethical from the wrong side of prison boundaries, it's never too late. But the truth is, many people don't make changes until they've taken that punch to the face. When I was in prison, I wish I had started sooner. I wish I'd continued to cultivate character. When I graduated USC, I wish I'd read good books and implemented what I read. I wish I'd admired the right people and found role models instead of lionizing people who did nothing but make money. I wish I understood that even if UBS schemed with me and said it was okay, that I knew that it was wrong. There is no gray. If you can discern black and white, you can discern gray. I wish I learned these lessons before I brought so much pain and shame to my victims and my family, and all of the collateral consequences that endure going to federal prison and becoming embroiled in a government investigation. There are no do-overs in life. And lastly, I'll say, I want all of you to understand your tendencies. When my client Keith would come in and listen to me kvetch, as us Jews say about my senior partner Kenny, that he didn't recognize me, wouldn't give me a raise. He listened to me, but he exploited me, and he played into my fears and vulnerabilities. When he'd tell me what I want to hear, and on the way out, he would grab that letterhead that he would send to clients. I want you to understand your tendencies. What are they? Are you lazy? Are you a people pleaser? Are you dogmatic? What are your tendencies? Because if you don't know them, there's some slick talking salesman who's going to exploit it. He's going to take advantage of you. You've got to understand your tendencies. These are many of the lessons I learned from the wrong side of prison boundaries. And in retrospect, I would do it all differently. I would do it all differently. I'm very grateful that you've chosen to listen to this 40-minute live video covering turning the other way, fraud, deception, deceit, and some lessons I learned while traversing the system. As I close, I will say, I blame no one but myself for my troubles with the law. If you take one thing away from this message, it is nobody's fault but my own. It's not my co-defendant's fault. It's not the FBI's fault. It's not my lawyer's fault. It's not the judge's fault. It's my fault. And if you're going through struggle, when you get to a point where you can say, it's my fault, I own it, and here's how I'm going to do better, you will be on the right side. You will begin to get back on track. Thank you for being a part of our community. I'm very grateful. Goodbye.